Michigan just annihilated Notre Dame, 2 defensive linemen in 2 days on the recruiting trail. We are going to get into that and a whole bunch more on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Big thank you to all of you out there who are everydayers, listen to our show every single day, and also thank you for making us your first listen. If you're watching, I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on the hat. I used to wear it when we did Morning Drip. It is what it is. I like it. All right. Let's get into a couple different things I want to discuss. First, we're going to get into the recruiting aspect, and then we're going to get into ESPN. Has the future power rankings. I have some disagreements there. I want to get into those things. And then we're going to wrap up by getting into Charlie Baker's comments. I know normally that would be front loaded, but I think it's worth just kind of touching on. It's not necessarily something we're going to do in a whole 8 minutes on. So that is the plan for today. Let's get into the recruiting piece. I like saying it that way because it's very Don Brown-esque. So Michigan's got its 9 commits now after they just won yet another recruiting battle against Notre Dame. 2 edge rushers, or not edge rushers, but 2 defensive linemen in as many days that were expected to go to Notre Dame just 2 days ago. Before Mikhail Blade suddenly made his move. And then you saw Alistair Vallejo. I don't know how to say his name or how he says his name, right? I don't know if he goes with the whatever. We'll find out eventually when we get a pronunciation guide or I talk to him, one of the two, which gives Michigan now. I'm looking at the 24/7 rank. Let's do the composite ranking here. That gives Michigan 6 4-stars and 3 3-stars at this juncture, led off by Brady Smigel. Then you got Matt Ludwig, Mikhail Blade, Brody Jennings, Bear McWhorter, Alistair Vallejo, who is ranked highest on 24/7 Sports, which has him in the 200s. But the composite has him down at 410, large part because ESPN has not yet rated him. Which is criminal. So if you watch any of his film, I mean, he's about as close to a Mason Graham clone as you can get. And the fact that they were able to get him and Blade, I mean, that kind of shows that the NIL piece, now that the House settlement is said and done, that now Michigan is able to talk numbers with guys. They waited their turn. They waited to kind of be like, okay, we're going to be smart about this. We're not going to overpromise and underdeliver. We want to make sure that what we are promising is what they are going to get. We don't want to say, hey, you're going to get this, and then everything changes or anything like that. So Michigan was smart to do that. But now it's in a situation where they're able to go out and fire on all cylinders. And you're starting to see that with the fact that they just had these 2 head-to-head wins over the Irish. Yeah, kind of fun going over to Blue and Gold Illustrated or whatever it's called over at On3 and see the opinions that came in as Blade went before Vallejo ended up becoming a Wolverine. And then, just the internecine fight between them and their moderators, especially because they want to say, well, Lou Esposito hasn't done anything, right? It's like, well, he did still manage to coach 2 guys into the first round of the NFL draft. I understand it was only 1 year of coaching, but the guys rave about Lou, and that it was just a really great find. And it kind of does remind me of Mason Graham, for as much as I don't think that we can heap those types of expectations on Alistair per se. At this point, right? Like if you were to look back at where Mason Graham was ranked at this point in the recruiting cycle, he was a 3-star across the board, right? Eventually, he decommitted from Boise State and ended up flipping to Michigan. And that's when everyone started getting their eyes on him. And then he became not a consensus 4-star. He was pretty close, but not quite. I did a piece over on Wolverines Wire about the guys who were underrated maybe we can add that to the docket of shows that we'll do this month here. But I think that's it's incredible. So now you've got two edges. And I guess it depends on if you see Mikhail Blade as an edge. He's 6'4", 245 right now. He's a guy that can bulk up and be inside. Tariq Boney, who's kind of your Josiah Stewart type. And then you're still looking at Carter Meadows. You're still looking at Trenton Henderson, a couple other guys who are out there. So it's interesting because you can kind of see what Michigan's doing in that it is kind of somewhat rebuilding the defensive line in the image of that which they've had the most success. I'm curious to see what Titan Davis does, and if he's ends up being a dude. Let's look him up real quick. I could have done this the easy way. Instead, I'm doing it the hard way here. Again, looking out of let's see. So Titan Davis is 6'4", 5', 270, and it's between Michigan and Alabama. I do like Michigan for that once that all kind of becomes said and done. And I think that, him visiting on Victor's weekend, I think is huge. He's visiting USC this week. But at the same time, I don't want to undersell just being able to get a head-to-head win over the Irish, who certainly and rightfully were touting the win of getting Javion Osborne, who looked like a Michigan lean for the longest time while Michigan was in this kind of purgatory in terms of not really being able to go in and say what their numbers are going to be and all of that. I think, and, of course, Javion Osborne was not, no offense to him, great kid. I've talked to him a few times. He's someone who has been, really looking at being that number one guy, and he wasn't going to be that in Ann Arbor. So, because they really want to get, obviously, Savion Hyder, who visits this week. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this ends up turning out in terms of just getting the overall recruiting class going. You can kind of see, like, this is why I expressed caution not too long ago, because you eventually can see the method to the madness. And I've seen other people point out, we went through and said, how many commits did Michigan have at different points? We're not going to go over that again. But others who had pointed out that at around this time last year, they had 3 commitments, right? So they eventually got to that point where they had a class that ended up being number 6 overall. No one's complaining about last year's class, but this is the reason why I encourage patience and that you need to exercise that, because this is how Michigan goes. And to be able to have head-to-head wins over some of these guys, it's huge. Now, obviously, disappointment yesterday, as soon as we ended the show, then Steve Wiltfong had put in a flip prediction for Brady Marchese to flip from Georgia, and then it was like an hour and a half later, I was out on my walk with Zuri, and then suddenly we get news that he, along with several other Georgia commitments who were looking elsewhere, all had decided to stay put. So I think that's fine to not get him in particular in the class. I can't say what Michigan's thoughts were on him. I don't know. But there are certainly some other guys at the wide receiver position that I look at and I say, I'd much rather have a Travis Johnson, Zion Robinson. I think I got that right. Again, the Johnson Robinson, I just want to intersperse those. It's like a last name dyslexia. I'd rather be able to swing for the fences and go out and try to get a Calvin Russell, who I believe is kind of their top wide receiver on the board. If they can get him to visit, that would be huge. And then, is a CJ Sadler, is he's still looming out there, right? Like I will say this is CJ Sadler. I had a pre-commitment story written for him back in November last year, and it just didn't come to pass. Do they reconvene? Does he end up being a guy? I could see them taking 4 edge rushers. I could see them taking 4 wide receivers in this class, in large part because they did not have that in the last class, right? Aren't looking back at last year's class, because Nate Marshall, I think, projects more inside eventually. He might start off as an edge. And, I think that they do have a lot of edges that are now more so third-year guys, right? Or second-year guys maybe in some of the cases, but like a guy like Lugard Adakpai, guys like Devin Baxter, who are still coming along, that, and all of that. But just to kind of conclude the recruiting piece, I think that they need to swing for the fences now, because I would not count on you, keeping in mind that whoever they get now is going to be here next year as a true freshman. So that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to see the field early, no matter how good they are. Maybe, right? Like if that person is a Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith type, which is hard to come by, then yeah, they could. But you want to have that guy ready to go sophomore year when it comes to playing with Bryce Underwood in his junior and likely final year in Ann Arbor. So that's how I would look at that. All right, we are going to continue on. I want to get into this ESPN future, the future power rankings of it all. We are going to do that here in just a moment. But before we do, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds is the kind of atmosphere that you absolutely have to experience live. Listen, I did it back in the Pistons run. It's mind-bendingly amazing. This year's matchups, they are delivering. Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. If you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest games out there. Prices on the app actually go down closer to the tip-off with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Gametime is a total game changer. Just looking on the app, you can see so many great deals for the Pacers and Thunder. I love that I can see the exact seat view before you buy. There's no surprises. The app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 taps, and then I'm done. And with the Gametime guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they will credit me 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, I know a lot of you like to complain about the ESPN, like when we talk about ESPN, what they have to say and what have you. Listen, like we are in June, right? Like I can't tell you what like Sharon Moore is saying about whatever and my reaction to that. Or I mean, we could talk about the linebackers again. That's the joke I've been using for years at this point. Of like, oh, all right, I guess we'll talk about, happy Wednesday. Let's talk about the linebackers again. It could be an every week thing. We could go through every single position group basically every week and it ended up being the same thing. So we are just reacting to certain things, or we're just telling you what, so maybe you don't have to go and read the ESPN article. But they have Michigan in their future power rankings. They did the top 68 teams. And Michigan last year was number 5. I thought that was relatively appropriate. I understand, like there was a lot of projection coming off of a national championship, thinking that maybe some of the pieces were going to be better than they ended up being on the offensive side of the ball. But I think it was an overreaction to drop Michigan from 5 to 13. Because remember, this isn't like future power rankings as of this year, right? It's future power rankings for the like health of the program for the next several years. And the way I look at it is, and they, and this is from my friend and colleague, Adam Rittenberg, great guy. I love Adam. But talking about some of the things here, they're talking about Bryce Underwood. And I think that, I mean, he's playing a little, we'll see type of thing. But returning quarterback, Michigan needed a reset at quarterback after a dreadful passing season and will turn to number 1 overall recruit Bryce Underwood or Fresno State transfer Mikey Keene this season. The likelihood of multi-year quarterback, extremely. The Wolverines have gone all in with Underwood, their first mega high school signing of the NIL era. Unless things go very wrong, Underwood will be leading Michigan's offense through the 2026 season and beyond. The way I look at it with Underwood leading the charge, barring some kind of just complete and utter collapse, which I just do not foresee, I think that tells you that the health of the program in and of itself is good. Now, like it goes on and talks about like, defensive line should be solid this fall if the tackle transfers pan out. The offensive line enters a significant season with less established players and young tackles. But I don't see the offensive line that way because, I mean, you've still got three guys who started the bulk of the season last year. And then you've got one guy who started one game who is young. So, I mean, yeah, you are going to have some youth and some inexperience. But I think that seems to be kind of a national narrative, this idea that the offensive line is like, oh, it's just so much youth. It's like, well, actually, it's the bulk of it is what you saw last year. And while that wasn't good, players tend to get better, especially at the offensive line position, rather than regress. Now, they can regress. We saw some regression just from Giovanni Elhadi very specifically. But I think like you're going to see, and this is where I disagree. I think you're going to see an Evan Link look a lot better, especially now that he's back on the left side, assuming he gets to start there. I think you're going to see Greg Crippen be even better now that he's got a second year under his belt of being, playing big time college football, not just being a bench warmer guy coming in for snaps late in the games and stuff like that. I think that those are the types of things that are really going to help this team out just by the virtue of them having had more time on task. And again, I don't really have, and I could be wrong, right? Like there's the caveat with most everything, not everything, but most everything is I could be wrong. There's some things that I will stand up for, right? Like my belief of what's going to happen with Michigan and the not the specific punishments, but that the proverbial hammer is that coming down to I think I'm wrong there? No, I don't. But like some of these positional things and the whole, they play games for a reason stuff. Yeah, I could be wrong. But he notes that Michigan's been smart and selective in the portal. Its additions along both lines and at running back with Alabama transfer Justice Haynes will impact the coming season. Mentions as far as star power, the expectations around Underwood, and then having Dominic Zavada as well as Derek Moore and Zeke Berry and all of that. And then just noted that Moore has settled in after much of the staff followed predecessor Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. He will be judged largely on the success of offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey, who has no previous ties to Moore or Michigan. The team retained defensive coordinator Wink Martindale for a second season. Like, I think he's got all the right components, but I just think that Michigan is somewhat underrated. And I think that's where you look at, like, ahead of Michigan in the Big Ten. I mean, you've got Ohio State at number 2, Oregon at number 4, Penn State at number 6. There's a little bit of recency bias, and that's not uncommon. I mean, we see that every single year, a bunch of recency bias throughout. It's always very confounding to me that every single year it's like, well, the teams that were bad last year, they might be good this year. I mean, you're right. Like Michigan being 13 kind of tells you there are high expectations for Michigan going forward. But I think though, when you're looking and saying, well, the future is brighter everywhere else, all the teams that tend to be Big Ten, those Big Ten teams that you think of as being like the higher end ones, I think that kind of has that recency bias, especially when you look at like who's ranked ahead of Michigan outside of the Big Ten. Arizona State. I mean, I don't know that they're poised. I know what their head coach said recently. I don't know that they're poised to be that type of team that you're like, yeah, they're going to be just really good every year. Miami. I mean, listen, I don't hate on Miami, but I feel like they're kind of in the same boat as like Nebraska, where it's like, yeah, you can sit there and say this year might be the year, but like to me, Miami, if they couldn't do it last year with Cam Ward and the schedule they had and all of that, like that's a problem, So I understand they got Carson Beck now. I don't know if he's really that game changer type. I mean, he played well enough at Georgia, but I mean, I've watched some of those Georgia games. I didn't look at Carson Beck as being nearly in the same league as Stetson Bennett, who was a former walk-on. I additionally look like, so you got those two teams. You got Alabama, Tennessee, LSU. LSU is another one, man. They're probably going to lose their season opener for the 4th straight year under Brian Kelly. I don't know at what point, like, you just sit there and say, like, they are who they are. Whereas I look at Michigan and you say that, okay, they're going to take a step back. Okay, they took their step back. Generally, like, you see, I mean, unless you're Ohio State, who's going to win double-digit wins every year, kind of no matter what, and has since 2011, I look at it and I say, all right, Michigan had what looks to me like a blip on the radar. I understand new coaching staff, essentially. Very few, a couple holdovers from the Jim Harbaugh era, but not many. Some of the guys have been around, right? Like Steve Kasula had been around during the Jim Harbaugh era. But otherwise, it's Sharon Moore, Grant Newsome, Ron Bellamy. And then outside of that, it's, I mean, Brian Jean-Marie was around in 2020. But I think that one of the things that really impresses me about what this team is it is a more experienced team, 29th in the country, according to Bill Connolly, and you return almost the entire coaching staff. And the only place that you don't return someone is at the offensive coordinator position, where you needed to make that change. So to me, I look at this and I say the future super bright in Ann Arbor. And I think that, I mean, 13th is still pretty bright, but when a 12-team playoff that's on the outside looking in most years, I think that Michigan's going to surprise a lot of people, including my friend and colleague, Adam. All right, we're going to continue on. We've got more coming up. Let's talk about Charlie Baker and what he said to Ross Dellinger. We're going to do that here in just a moment. All right. Interesting. The only thing that we have heard publicly from the coming out of the Committee on Infractions hearing, Michigan and the NCAA, Ross Dellinger talked to Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, and he said very briefly, it was a thorough hearing of the issues and everybody that wanted to speak their piece for the most part got it. And then he continues saying he expects a ruling in 30 to 90 days. Can close the iPad now. Number one, I saw a lot of people parsing over that, and I don't know that. I don't know that that's a statement that you need to parse over. I think you should take it at face value. That's just my opinion. As far as I don't think it's a situation where you have to see if there's any clues hidden in there. But obviously recall that he said Michigan won everything fair and square. A lot of people have been, that was the day after the national championship. You've got the fact that he wasn't there in Indianapolis for the Committee on Infractions hearing. Obviously, he was dealing with the House settlement stuff. I see all kinds of craziness over on some of the other boards. It's talking about what, it's all Buckeye Scoop related, where they're continuing to have they're going to have their fever dream until the fever dream dies. And talking about, there's going to be another NOA coming from the Matt Weiss stuff, because they want to believe that it's something other than what the Department of Justice said it was. Because, of course, the United States government is just burying the lead, for your point, and not to mention and I could be wrong here, but the enforcement arm of the NCAA is kind of going by the wayside. They're going to have a CEO that kind of handles these things. This, to my understanding, this sign gate of it all is the last hurrah for NCAA enforcement. They're still going to be involved in some enforcement things, but something like this, I believe this is kind of their last hurrah, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think that just I think the 30 to 90 days, that is interesting. I know a lot of people are throwing out the 45-day number. I kind of hope that happens, because that would come literally the day that Michigan goes at Big Ten Media Days. I see a lot of people say, they're going to drop it right before the season and all of that stuff, and just to screw Michigan. Listen, number one, the COI, like we talked about yesterday, is the panel is not the same as enforcement. These are not the same people. Again, to go back to Angelique's article, these are people who are either members of the NCAA or tabbed by the NCAA, right? Like this is not the angriest person in enforcement who is also deciding Michigan's fate. So there's that. So I don't think that there's going to be a whole bunch of vindictiveness when it comes to the decisions here, right? So I think you take all of this as it is, and I have not changed my view of what I think is going to happen, right? Like in terms of severity. And in terms of severity, I think it's going to continue to either be like the kind of status quo, maybe a little bit more. But, like I said, like the the two, does the 2 games become 4? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, somewhere in that range is what I'm going to guess. And in large part, I mean, I still think I still think the 2 games is an overreach personally. But given, again, thrown more throughout the trash, but then went into the trash, picked up the trash, gave it to the NCAA, but, you shouldn't have thrown it in the trash to begin with. I understand that there are people that are out there that want to say, oh, well, the fact that he did it he threw it in the trash to begin with, the text messages, that is, means that that he was a culprit in this, and you can't not believe that he was, okay, right? Like, that's, I understand also that rivals want to think that someone like me is going to sugarcoat things. Anyone who knows me in real life knows that I try to be as truthful as possible, right? The same people that say, oh, you were lying about Ryan Day. No, I was telling you, not saying that. I know that Ryan Day and had blah, 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 and did this and this and this. I was telling you Michigan believes that. That is still true, right? That is still true. I'm not saying that that's what I necessarily believe. Now, I'm increasingly believing things of that nature, but I'm not giving you my opinion there. So it's I try to be as truthful as possible. Been the case my whole life. I'm not, when a lot of people say, oh, I'm truthful to a fault, that I'm going to tell you what it is. Usually it's they're saying that to try to justify the ability to be a jerk. I'm not doing that. Right? Like, I have tact, but I am not telling you things for clout. I don't care about that. I'm generally uncomfortable with it, to be honest. If I'm not trying to tell you anything to get you to tune in. Again, like, even though this is my livelihood, I don't care that much. I'm not trying to do anything other than tell you what I have heard, what I believe to be true. And if I'm wrong, we'll correct the record. And I've never said that this is what the NCAA 100% is going to do. But I can tell you, based off of the things that I know, which jives with the things that Charlie Baker has said, that I do not believe that the long arm of the fake law is going to come down on Michigan in some kind of crazy way. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We will mailbag it again tomorrow. Can't believe it's Thursday already. I don't know why. It feels like yesterday felt like it was Wednesday or Thursday. Today feels like it's Monday. I don't understand. Anyway, we're going to be back. Again, thank you so much to all of our everydayers out there. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.